Now, Mr. Bass wasn't even supposed to be my teacher at all. He was just subbing in for someone else for a few months, but he shaped how I saw the world at a time when I was just starting to understand its complexity. I couldn't vote yet, but I was paying attention. We were paying attention. Now, Mr. Bass never told us what to think. He taught us how to think. He pushed us to go beyond headlines, to interrogate our sources, to focus on policy. He gave us the tools to navigate a democracy, not just as future voters, but as present citizens. I consider myself extremely lucky to have been one of his students. And now, for the next little while, you get to be one of his students as well. So please welcome the one, the only, Mr. David Bass.
I really don't deserve that. That is just, okay, that was far more than I deserved, seriously. Thank you very much. You know, the humiliation of age here, reading glasses. So, I haven't committed it to memory. You'll have to bear with me as I read here. Good afternoon. Rick asked me to come by to offer my thoughts on the current state of our union. State of the Union address, for me, doesn't hold a lot of value, but since it's free, here it is. Our union is based on a 236-year-old agreement that attempted to allow enlightened individual self-interest to work through a structure promoting compromise while limiting possible abuses of power. It was an experiment reflecting the Enlightenment belief that all people are capable of logically identifying their personal and societal interest. Simply put, it was a compromise made in order to promote further compromise. The Constitution was a reflection of the limits of its time. Women were excluded, as were people of color and white men without property. The document's use has evolved, addressing changes in society that would have shocked most of the founders. The Constitution, our living Constitution, has needed to reflect the significant changes that have transpired over the course of 10 generations. Those generations saw a bloody narrative of slavery and genocide, building wealth for some and horrific misery for others. But always, at the heart of that initial agreement has been the belief in the ability of people to identify their individual and societal interests, and for those interests to be considered and protected. Establishing common ground for compromise is a deeply difficult thing to achieve, particularly when wealth and power are involved. Emotions can pervert actual rational interest, as we've seen again and again through our history. As Faulkner said, the past is never dead. It's not even past. Consider the South in the years leading up to the Civil War. 75% of Southern whites did not own slaves, yet they allowed themselves to be ruled by an elite slave power. James Henry Hammond, in his famous Cotton is King speech, made it clear that wealthy slave owners, the cream of Southern society, should rule because poor whites, mudsills, couldn't be trusted with power. As a result of this kind of governance, Southern whites went without public schools, roads, industrial development, and the value of their labor was degraded by the wealthy's use of enslavement. That 75% were drawn away from their interests through the slave power's promotion of a racist hierarchy that gave poor whites a sense of identity. The fear of losing that racial standing, tied to a loyalty to tradition, regional pride, and honor, were the tools used against the poor majority's interests. They all seem very familiar. Less than 1% of Southern enslavers owned 70 slaves, and only 0.1% of white Southerners, 1 in 1,000, owned 100 enslaved people. The interests of those large slave owners, this 1/10%, drove the national politics of the day. In one consequential example, the entire nation was forced to participate in the abuses of the Fugitive Slave Act. Imagine people being assaulted and picked up off the streets by strangers with virtually no due process to be deported to a life without freedom. In the end, although it's a little reductive, The United States faced a civil war to a large degree because of the political interests of this 0.1% slave power. Consider the demagoguery that resulted from the narrow self-interest of that economic elite almost destroyed the nation. And that elite continued their war with the attack that they made on Reconstruction. The antebellum elite threw everything they could against new institutions, against the Freedmen's Bureau, schools, improvements, honest elections. And once again, they used race to divide and conquer. The Black Codes, the rise of the Ku Klux Klan, the Jim Crow laws, lynching, all were used as a way of fighting to maintain a white supremacy that could be controlled by them. Or consider the Red Scare of 1919-1920. The country had just emerged from the Great War and faced significant economic and societal changes. As inflation surged, labor unions organized strikes. As black veterans returned from the war, they made it clear that they expected improvement in their treatment under Jim Crow laws. Rather than respecting and integrating compromise through the system, demagogues claimed that Bolsheviks were behind all the ruckus. Confrontations like the Battle of Blair Mountain, the Boston police strike, the crushing of the Great Steel Strike of 1919, the forced decline of labor unions through changes in state and federal policies, and the many horrific racial pogroms throughout the country, most famously the massacre in Tulsa, Oklahoma in 1920, were dismissed by many as self-defense from an internal enemy, communism. This fear of internal enemies manifested itself in an anti-immigrant frenzy, which led to the rise of the 1920s Ku Klux Klan, the deportation of immigrants due to their political beliefs, and highly restrictive immigration laws. The more recent McCarthy Red Scare of the 1950s worked in similar ways by, again, using the fear of a non-existent domestic enemy for political purposes. Careers were ruined, university faculties purged, civil rights withheld, all in the interest of cynically promoting an emotional reaction as opposed to engaging Enlightenment principles as our founders expected. These demagogues were cynically lying, ruining the lives of others for their individual short-term gain. The public interest took a back seat to manufactured public fear. And now, here we are, back to the future. Mark Twain supposedly said that history doesn't repeat itself, but that it rhymes. The big, beautiful bill will return billions to the upper 1% while removing necessary medical, housing, and nutritional support for those suffering from income stagnation, as well as stripping research money necessary for the well-being of the nation. Consider that ICE funding will increase by a factor of 10, creating an enormous new federal police power. These recurring themes of national pride, racial hierarchy, fear of change and of the other are all being used to get people to forget their interest. Woke leftist lunatics bent on destroying our country is not an invitation to debate. It's just a way of reviling debate. Is this different from what's happened in the past? Will people return to rationality? Will the next election bring us back to sanity? Our history offers evidence that it's possible to move forward with enough hard work and sacrifice on the part of those who are able to see through the fraud. I believe that it's clear that the new model of illiberal democracy is the greatest threat that our system faces. It's an old tune made new. By promoting conspiracy theories and alternate facts, these modern fascists create an environment where factual truth is obfuscated or denied. In the absence of truth, of factual evidence, debate is impossible, and that's fatal to democracy. When nothing is knowable, power wins by default. You could certainly ask Vladimir Putin about that. A big, beautiful bill can be presented as responsible. A mother taking her kids to school can be presented as a dangerous criminal alien. Inclusion can be pitched as anti-white racism, and 2 + 2 can be claimed to be 5. The current president's amoral selling of the nation's future is trading our long-term good for his short-term economic and political gain. Quite honestly, he's a self-centered dilettante squandering an inheritance for immediate gain. But it's our inheritance. We have to collectively return to thinking, to identifying our logical self-interest based on facts and not on emotions or propaganda. Jerry Garcia once said, "Somebody has to do something, and it's pathetic that it has to be us." But here we are, now, standing as defenders of our inheritance, a legacy built through the protections provided by our Constitution. It will require time and commitment, but that's something you Justice Southbury folks have demonstrated again and again. As it always has been, so hopefully it will be. And in the end, that appears to be the state of our union. Stay strong.